When it comes to Allah and human beings, the human being was the steward, the representative of Allah to the creation, right? Because Allah created and He commanded. Allah lahul khalq wal amr. Okay, there's this important distinction. Allah's creation has certain rules that it can't help but follow. The laws of physics, the laws of so many laws, electromagnetism, gravity, and all that kind of stuff. These are things that are we're forced to obey. But then Allah gave other types of laws that He gave us a choice in. If you obey, this is the consequence. If you disobey, this is the consequence. Right? Some of those laws He gave to His prophets to give via revelation, and some of those laws He inspired in human beings in their fitrah, in their natural disposition. Right? But just like when there is harmony between, from the subatomic level all the way up to the kind of astronomical level, when matter, when objects are subject to Allah's laws in a ontological sense, i.e. the laws of physics, laws of nature, there's harmony, there's balance. Likewise, if we push, and when we have in the past as human beings, when we push to make our societies, our families, our relationship with the creatures and the creation, when we push to obey and be coherent with Allah's laws in which He gave us a choice, shari'i laws, His command, His instruction, likewise there is harmony. Likewise there is more barakah. And likewise, if you go away from that instruction, there is punishment, there is the evil spreads, fahisha spreads. Remember the hadith we discussed before, 5 things? No people withhold their zakah except Allah stops the rain. No people commit fahisha, sexual promiscuity, and these types of sins, except that Allah causes disease and death to spread. Right? So there's consequences for obeying and disobeying. Right? The problem, however, is along the line somewhere, especially in modern times, we've started to look at Allah's instructions as one whole indivisible kind of block. Yeah? And that goes back to the notion of ma anzalallah, what Allah revealed. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and it's used by a lot of modern groups, وَمَنْ لَمْ يَحْكُمْ بِمَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهِ فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْكَافِرُونَ, for example. And whoever doesn't yahkum, rule, judge, implement according to what Allah revealed, then those indeed are the disbelievers. Okay? And another ayah, those are evildoers, and another ayah, those are unjust. Okay? So, along the line, unfortunately, and especially in modern times, some people started to look at Islam or Sharia or what Allah has revealed as one kind of discrete, indivisible block. Yeah? Now you have Islam, now you have kufr. Now you have a Sharia system, now you have a Taghut system. Now you have Ma Anzalallah, and now you have Ghayri Ma Anzalallah. Okay? What Allah, a system according to what Allah revealed, and a system according to, Taghut and Mushrikeen and that kind of stuff. Okay? And this is a big problem in our thinking in modern times, because it's very different to the way the Prophet ﷺ taught Islam to the companions, where he implemented it. Because somewhere along the line we've thought, for example, this is a kufr system. This is an evil, un-Islamic system. Okay? Rather than saying, this is a system, there are parts of it which are un-Islamic, and there are parts of which are Islamic. you see what I'm saying here? It's a fundamentally different way of looking at things. One thing is a complete indivisible block, okay, that we're looking to implement Islam as one system, okay, and one is, there are bits of something that might be Islamic and bits of evil impurities, okay, in which case, so if your worldview is dominated by one of this type of approach, okay, you're going to probably look for somewhere to go and implement this as a whole, all of a sudden, in one complete go. But if your worldview is like this, more towards that side, then you're going to try and fix those impurities, right? And hone in on these things and attack them, yeah, to try and rub them out and bring something in more in line with what Allah has revealed, okay? So for example, poverty, someone might say on this type of thing, you won't eradicate poverty until you establish Sharia in a country fully, yeah? And on this side of the thing, someone might say, in order to fix poverty, you can actually take these steps, fund local services or blah, 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 whatever, okay? Create jobs, that kind of stuff, give people a livelihood. Now, this, whether you look at stuff like this or whether you look at stuff like that, in my opinion, this is also down to your personality as well, okay? I think this is highly influenced by a personality type. Or at one point, someone might look at something like this in their life, and one other point they might look at something like that. Like the other day, I was walking down the tube station, the stairs, and when the train comes, people just come all over the place from the different sides of the stairwell, but it says walk on the left. And I was walking on the left, but loads of people are coming from here, and the way is clear on the right. So what did I do? I just moved out of the way and just went down the wrong way, because it's not a big deal in my worldview. Yeah, but there was a bit of me that said, wait, I'm walking on the correct side. They should be the one to move. Okay. And where you are along the spectrum of, I'm right, this is the right way to do things, make everyone else, make this, the system change, and come on, just go down the stairs, get on with it already, it's a minor issue. That spectrum, I think it is influenced by your personality as well to some degree. But it's also influenced by the kind of tarbiyah people get. And in my opinion, there's a huge crisis of tarbiyah. Because when it comes, and this is what I'm meaning here, okay? When we talk about Sharia on the pulpit, in the minbar, on the khutbah, in iman boosting reminders and, nice to listen to things, we often, it's normal, we use certain language that is specific for that context. We say, follow the Quran and the Sunnah. We say, follow Islam and you would be successful. We'll say, don't compromise on your principles and be a good Muslim, right? Avoid the hellfire, and so on and so forth. This is you can call a good type of hyperbole. When you're encouraging someone to good, you describe Jannah and all good things. When you're encouraging them away from bad, you skip to hellfire and this tarheeb and targheeb. Okay, bringing people close to good things and pushing them away from bad things. That's talking about Sharia. But when it comes to actually doing Sharia, when it comes to actually the faqih, for example, or the mufti who is doing research and delivering a verdict, someone in a judge position, two people are coming to them with a dispute, maybe a husband and a wife or business partners or whatever, or a criminal, okay, being accused by someone coming to a court. The actual practice of the Sharia is very different to how we speak about Sharia in the Jummah khutbah. But the problem is we have generations of Muslims who've grown up not appreciating this difference. So now everyone has a voice. Everyone can talk about Sharia and criticize those actually doing Sharia. And the example of elections and voting and that kind of stuff is one of these examples. Because pretty much every fiqh council on planet Earth, every major mufti, every major scholar in this country and in other countries and non-Muslim lands and all over the place, resoundingly says what Muslims should take part in elections, okay, in these democratic countries and in Europe and Pakistan and India and Bangladesh and all that kind of stuff. And in fact, they've been doing so for decades, okay. The Muslims in the Asian subcontinent, the Muslims in the Far East, in parts of Africa, even in Europe, they had really no issue with this, okay. But because of some political issues in the Middle East, in Saudi Arabia and Egypt in particular, we have in the UK echoes of haram fatwas, okay, that democracy is haram and kufr and these types of things and etc. So we end up looking at these fatwas and saying, wait a second, how can you be saying go and vote? Or in someone even saying you have to vote, it's a duty. I saw a statement of Mufti Taqi Uthmani Sahib, for example, Hafidhahullah, saying voting is not a right, it's a duty. Yeah. So how can you say this? Some people might think, but you're always telling us follow Islam and Islam is a complete system and democracy and Western kind of politics is batil and all that kind of stuff. Because there's a difference between how you talk about Sharia and when you actually give a ruling. Okay. And I'd like to give an example of that. Okay. How the difference between how a mufti thinks about things and how someone who talks about Sharia looks at things. Okay. So someone who is talking about Sharia, they'll say something like, Sharia is the whole system, you have to apply all of Sharia, you have to follow Sharia and so on and so forth, right? Which from that perspective in theory is good, is correct. Okay? But this goes back to the distinction between something in theory and something in practice. Okay? So let's look at an example. Traveling. What happens when you travel, Islamically?
Got some exemptions.
You got some exemptions, yeah. What?
Like prayers get like custom.
Yeah, you shorten your prayers, yeah. Okay.
Fasting.
Fasting, you can break your fast. Women are not allowed to travel by themselves. For example, they need a mahram. Now, that is different to what do you actually call traveling Islamically? What is safar? Yeah. So someone might think traveling is shorten prayer. Yeah. I am traveling, therefore I will shorten my prayer. Yeah? This is the difference between the theory and the practice. So this is a true statement and it will always be true, considering some things. But to do this step, you need someone who is trained to some extent in Islamic law, Islamic fiqh. Okay, why? Because you need to know when this applies to a particular point from A to B. Okay, we all travel to get here. I travel all the way from Slough. I'm traveling, right? Am I traveling or not?
Yes.
I'm traveling. Am I shortening my prayers?
No.
No. Someone says, Astaghfirullah. The Prophet ﷺ said when you travel you shorten your prayers. Am I going against the Prophet ﷺ?
It depends on the definition of traveling.
Yeah, depends on not just the definition of traveling, but does that definition of traveling apply to something in real life and reality? Remember the Manhaj al-Istidlal framework?
Yeah.
Source, understanding,
And implementation.
implementation. Because of the way Sharia is spoken about, and because of modern communication methods, we have a lot of this stuff happening by general masses, and it's very good. We need to understand our deen and so on and so forth. But a lot of our brothers and sisters, we fail to realize that this step, it can't just be done by anyone. Even though this step is 100% clear, 1,000% clear. Yeah? Someone might be, there's absolutely no ambiguity in this. This is like as clear as the sun. But that does not mean you can go ahead and do this part. This part requires some principles and some knowledge. Yeah? Such as what? Excellent, yeah. So some things are to do with the sunnah, and some things are to do with understanding a theory, and some things are to do with understanding the practical reality on the ground. Yeah. Now, some people, they went into an error. They said, anyone can do this. Right? Anyone, they separated between the Islamic and the reality. That anyone can just look at the reality themselves, or an expert in that reality who's not trained in Islamic fiqh. They can understand this fully, and then they can require and take whatever ruling that they find from the Quran and the Sunnah. This is absolutely wrong. Okay? Absolutely wrong. Why? Because Islamic scholar, he is looking at the reality from a very particular perspective, and he knows what he's looking for. And someone who might be an expert in that thing might think, you don't know anything about this subject, and you're all these muftis, the Maulvis or whatever, right? But he is going to be like, I understand what you're saying, but only this part is relevant to the ruling. Yeah, based on the actual sharia. And I'll give you an example. Okay, this happens in many areas. This happens in biology, for example. Okay, DNA test to establish the paternity of a person. Someone might think, if you establish the DNA by DNA evidence of a person and his son or his daughter, that is khalas, he is the father. Okay, but Sharia says no. That's not the definition of father from a Shari'i perspective. Sharia says the father of a child is the husband of its mother at the time of birth, at the time of pregnancy and birth. Okay? What's the difference? If, for example, the woman committed zina, yeah, وَلِيَعُوذُ بِاللَّهِ, and it's somebody else's child in her belly, and then she commits another sin, or don't say it's a sin. She marries someone, and she makes him think, or they think even, that this is his child, right? And then she has a baby. Who does that baby belong to in the Sharia?
The bed.
To the bed. Al-waladu lil-firash. Yeah? The child is ascribed to the husband of the mother. Okay? Now if somebody comes along and does a DNA test and says, actually, scientifically, I can prove he is not the father. And the Sharia scholar says, Jazakallah khair, but your services are not required here. Is the Sharia scholars against science? Is he anti-science?
No.
Why not? He's denying science. The definition of fatherhood according to Sharia is different to the definition of fatherhood according to biology. But the idea is biological nasab is different to Shari'i legal nasab. Yeah? For the purpose of marriage, divorce, inheritance, these types of things. Right? Who your lineage is and so forth. Likewise, someone who's an enthusiast in astronomy. This happens every year, twice a year. They'll say, no, I swear the new moon has been born. I can prove beyond a shadow of a doubt. Sharia scholar will say, Jazakallah khair, your service is not required here. Why? Is it because the Sharia scholar is anti-astronomy and anti-science? No. Because the definition of the start of the new month Islamically is slightly different. It includes it, but it's slightly broader than the definition of the start of the month astronomically. So there's a difference between astronomical something and shari'i something. Likewise, if somebody is an enthusiast in what they might think is the philosophical underpinnings of democracy, for example, or the secularist liberal democracy that we live in today, and to them, according to their worldview, they will say, no, if you put an X in a box, it means you support this party's manifesto. If you put an X in this box, it means you're giving them your consent to go and do something haram on your behalf. It's clear cut to me. And again, the Sharia scholar will look at the enthusiast and say, Jazakallah khair, I know you're an expert in this issue, but your service is not required here. Okay? To you it might be clear cut, absolutely clear cut. But the Sharia scholar knows what things he is looking for from his own tradition, from his own craft. Just like an English law, imagine an English law family court judge. Okay? A Muslim comes to him or her with his two wives. He says they're arguing with each other, or there's a dispute, can you resolve it, or whatever. What's the English court judge going to do? She's going to say, they're not both your wives, mate. You have to choose one. I don't accept this thing called two wives for one person. Well, the English law judge, when he or she comes to a matter, a mas'ala, you could shout it to them until you're blue in the face. You can say, no, they're both my wives. I had the mahar, I had the idhn of the wali, I had two shuhud, I had here all the papers. They're going to say, Jazakallah khair, but your service is not required here. Okay? If you want a ruling from the English court, the English court will only look at your dispute or whatever your issue is through its own lens. So it will say, this person is your wife because it meets the English law criteria. Okay? Regardless of what the philosophy behind your marriage is from your perspective. Do you get what I'm saying here? So there's a difference between the Islamic, when the Islamic jurist is looking at something, he's not looking at 100% of the scientific reality that according to your idea, your worldview or whatever. Even if you're 100% of the biggest expert in the world on that thing, he's going to say, Jazakallah khair, but I know what I'm looking for. Okay? And it's not obviously one person, these are councils and stuff that look at these things, and they invite experts, they invite medical experts, political scientists, economists and whatever, when they're discussing to make a ruling. They know what they're taking. The expert cannot impose his view on Muslim scholar. I don't want to labor the point, this is clear. I don't want to labor the point. Now, what is the scholar looking for? What is the Sharia scholar? Okay, how is he looking at things? This is very good when we're looking at one. Manhaj al-Istidlal model is very good when we're looking at something in theory, when we're talking about the theory behind something. Yeah? what is traveling, what is maita, carrion, hurimat alaykumul maita, yeah, carrion, dead meat is haram on you. So, but and I can't just go and implement, say, this piece of this chicken leg here, this drumstick, this is maita. There's a process to that. But when it comes to giving a fatwa, okay, things are a bit different. Here is this is the mukallaf. Okay, this is the morally accountable and responsible individual. He or she is coming to the mufti to get a fatwa. What does the mufti do? What does the faqih do? Okay, a jurist who is coming and delivering verdicts, or somebody in a judge, a qadi position. The way we've, unfortunately, many of us have learned Islam is they think they'll look at the Quran and the Sunnah and get an understanding and implement it on that person. Yeah. So, for example, my guy might come to you and say, can I, let's say voting. Can I vote in this election? Or who do I vote for? Now, somebody who looks at Sharia like this, right? i.e. someone who is not don't want to say anything bad, somebody who looks like that, they're going to say, okay, wait a second, what is this election about? This election is in a democracy and it's a secular state, and so-and-so person said that, so a philosopher said that when you vote for someone, you're actually deputizing them to go and commit shirk on your behalf. Therefore, this is shirk, okay, you can't do it, this is wrong, this is haram. So the fatwa is haram. Okay, so one method is voting equals, they'll say deputizing someone to do haram. Then they'll find somewhere in the Sharia saying, okay, it's haram to actually ask someone to do something haram for you, yeah? So haram to deputize someone for haram. Therefore, voting is haram. Yeah? And it makes sense, right? It makes sense, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
It does.
It's an argument, yeah.
And this is why I always tell people, just because something makes sense, it doesn't make it true. I always say that, yeah? It's so easy to make an argument that makes sense, that sounds appealing. And it's a human weakness of ours. It's called make sense stopping. When we learn something, we research, and when we come to a gut reaction or hear something for the first time, we go and look for evidence, we go and look for proofs until it starts making sense to us. Once it makes sense to us and it settles our heart on that thing, we stop looking for evidences in the proper sense. And any other further study is finding more and more proofs to support my conclusion. This is why debating is corruptive to the intelligence and corrupting to the heart and sincerity. Yeah. But what is a debate? Two sides just going at it. I'm going to try and cherry pick any means possible, any evidence just to prove my point. Yeah. This is a human weakness. So just because something makes sense, it doesn't make it true. Okay, we can find any example now. Right? Allah said, dead meat is haram for you. Carrion. Al-mayta. Mayta means dead meat. Now you go to your halal meat shop and says, excuse me, are these chickens alive? No. So they're dead. Yep, pretty much dead, 100%. So this is mayta and this is haram. Really? Makes sense, right? It does make sense. Just because it makes sense doesn't mean it's true.
Just because it makes sense doesn't mean it's true.
Yeah. This is actually, people have said this to me, right?
Yeah.
And because they look at Western philosophers, some Western philosophers, who said, like John Stuart Mill, John Locke, Thomas Hobbes to an extent, they said, the idea of a liberal state, by the way, democracy came afterwards, yeah. According to many people, the Western states were liberal first, and they said democracy was added as a top dressing. Well, we'll talk about democracy in a minute, inshallah. But they say, according to this philosopher, having a member of parliament is there to exercise your sovereignty. Because we don't need a God anymore, because in the Christian tradition, there's a difference between sovereignty of the king as representative of God and the sovereignty of the people. And once you get rid of the king, you get rid of God, and now the people have sovereignty and blah, 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 blah. Many of us have absorbed this like a sponge and are imposing it onto Islam now. So when we see something that looks kind of like a translation of sovereignty in the Quran and Sunnah, we jump to that and say, see, it makes sense. Democracy is batil and kufr, and having someone in parliament on your behalf is wrong, blah, 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 blah. Even if for argument's sake we said that was true. It's not. Even if for argument's sake we said Thomas Hobbes, John Locke, John Stuart Mill, they were talking of, they are the ones that you should speak to about, learning about democracy and so forth. They weren't talking about elections. They weren't talking about voting. They were talking about setting up the system in the first place, in contradiction to the divine right of kings. Yeah, they weren't talking about an election when the minister post is there, the MP post is there. You're just choosing who goes to that post. Because even Thomas Hobbes, he said, even if you don't consent, because you were silent, you are responsible for the outcome as well. Yeah. Anyway, they're not talking about voting. But I'm just putting that as an example. Let's talk about democracy phobia later. Yeah. Let's just look at how a fatwa works. Yeah. Break.
Do a break first.
Yeah.
And then
can I break? Okay. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu ala rasulillah. So before the break, we were saying when there's two different worldviews, two different epistemologies, two different regimes of thinking and knowledge and production and law, when they clash, one of them has to take precedence, right? And when you're looking at an Islamic ruling for something, the Islamic law, the sharia lens has to take precedence, right? So someone could argue until they're blue in the face from a biological perspective or a astronomy perspective or a Western philosophy or liberal philosopher perspective about X, Y, or Z. Sharia scholar will say, Jazakallah khair, your services are not required here. Alright? And then we said there are two competing kind of methodologies now. A modern one is the kind of what I call the reductionist methodology, of just looking at individual things in isolation. Okay, so what does a X mean in your ballot box, on your poll card? It means you are. So the argument, to put it fully, ruling a country according to your desires is wrong. It's haram. Next premise, voting is telling someone to do that on your behalf. Therefore, voting is wrong. Yeah. And again, it makes sense. Might make sense, but it doesn't make it correct or true in reality. Right? Why? Because when you're looking at Islamic ruling, you don't look at it through that lens. You look at it through the lens of the Islamic fiqh, of the sharia, of Islamic law. And how is that different? That looks at it as so. And the summary is, Islam looks at your voting card as, when you're putting an X in one box, it means your intention Islamically is what? The difference between all of the candidates. Not in theory, in abstract, you support that candidate and everything he does or she does in their whole life. You're looking at the difference between that. Now, I could easily say that you don't have to believe me, that makes sense as well. The point is, I'm trying to show you, so for us to appreciate what goes through the mind of a Islamic judge, Islamic jurist, a sharia scholar, when he or she is looking at giving an Islamic ruling on something. Okay, so here is the mukallaf. Let's delete that stuff because it's might be misleading. It's taking up space. Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. If you want to create arguments, you can make any argument that makes sense, but it doesn't make it true. Yeah, we're looking at something through the sharia, how a sharia scholar does it. Not that we implement things by ourselves, but that we appreciate the effort that goes into and the sophistication that goes into making a fatwa. Because the answer is haram, sunnah, mubah, makruh or wajib. I'm saying it in a different kind of order. They're going to give you like a one-word answer for something, for a whole thesis worth of thinking and research will just be summarized into a paragraph in a book of Fatwa. Yeah, it's like Sudoku. Sudoku at the end is so simple. It's obvious. Every box is 1 to 9. Yeah, but the person who filled it out, he went through some mental effort. Right? This is for us to appreciate what goes through the mind of a mufti. Now, this person, he's coming for I think we said voting, right? Instead of the other method, the modern method of just creating an argument that makes sense based on isolated Islamic texts, isolated from their context and abstract. This person here, okay, the mufti will first look at the shakhs. Okay, the individual. Who is this person? Okay, he will look at Muslim. Does he have the bare minimum moral responsibility? Islam aql bulugh. Is he an adult? Is he a Muslim? Is he of sane faculties? He'll also look at what they call awarid al-ahliyah. Okay, things that to look for, whether that determine what is obligatory on him and what he has to do. Okay, so those are of wujub and ada. Okay, say for example, this is just a crazily simple example. If somebody doesn't have one hand, or someone has one arm, okay, obviously the normal rulings of wudu don't apply to them. Yeah, that's just a very simple example. So the person, they look at the person. Okay, they also look at where they're coming from. What is their level of practicingness? Okay, so for example, a sister that comes to you and asks you a question about hijab, the mufti should look at the sister first. Is she even wearing it in the first place? Yeah. If she says, "Can I wear a see-through hijab?" Yeah, a slightly see-through, nice colourful patterns or whatever. Can I wear that? If she's not wearing hijab in the first place, she'll get one answer. If she is wearing full niqab, gloves, everything opaque, she's going to get another answer, right? And this happened to the Prophet ﷺ many times and the Sahaba. For example, I always mention the example, man comes, "Can I kiss my wife when I'm fasting?" Yeah. He said, "Of course." Paraphrasing. Another man comes, "Can I kiss my wife when I'm fasting?" "No, you can't." Yeah. Why? Because he looked at the person. One person, he said, "This is an old man. What's going to happen if he kisses his wife?" The other person, he was a young person. He said, if we allow this person to kiss his wife, it's going to lead to other things, and miskin is going to be fasting for 2 months. Yeah. Now somebody with the previous mindset of just looking at a rule in isolation, they'll say, Astaghfirullah, lima tuharrimu ma ahallallahu lak. Why are you making haram what Allah has made halal? Why are you making halal what Allah has made haram? Again, this goes back to what? The difference between how we talk about Sharia and how we do Sharia. When we talk about Sharia on the pulpit, yes, we have these, general statements, a bit of hyperbole that is necessary to scare people, to make them want to come to Islam and to follow Islam. But when you're actually crafting a fatwa, it's very different. Not implementing something from Islam doesn't mean you are against that thing or you're making halal haram or haram halal. Right? So you look at the person, the shakhs. You also look at, what's this? It's good drawing, isn't it? What's that?
Quran.
Yeah, it's a book, yeah, it's a text. Okay? Now one person, so this text applies to him, yeah? Like, if you go to the masjid, you pray 2 rak'ah, Tahiyatul Masjid. I mentioned this example before, yeah? It's a good example. This text says if you go to the masjid, you enter the masjid, you pray 2 rak'ah. Okay? Now somebody with a modernist kind of method towards Islamic text, they'll take this text and they'll begin to apply it on a person. Someone came to Imam Malik. Imam Malik rahimahullah, it's well known that of course in his school of thought, when you go to the masjid, you pray Tahiyatul Masjid. Except if it's before Maghrib, between Asr and Maghrib. Why? Because there's another text now that applies to this person that says there's a prohibition for certain non-obligatory prayers at these times of day. Okay, 3 times a day and 2 extra. Okay, so Imam Malik's madhab his position is, you go to the masjid for Maghrib, before sunset, you just sit down, you don't need to pray 2 rak'ah. Then a child comes to him and he says, Astaghfirullah ya Imam, don't you know that you're supposed to pray 2 rak'ah when you enter the masjid? The Prophet ﷺ said. What did he say? Normally what you do is you try to teach them, this actually look, you draw a little diagram, there's no time when there's only one text applicable to you. Yes, when we teach the theory in books of fiqh, we do look at one text at a time. And we go through this process, yeah? But don't think that's how you do when you implement it in real life. When you implement it, there is another text that you have to take into consideration. But Imam Malik didn't do that. He just got up and he prayed. Then his companion said to him, Ya Imam, did you change your position? And he said, no. But when the boy, he said to me, get up and pray, there was another text that came into the situation. He said, I didn't want to be considered as among those people whom Allah said about them, وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمُ ارْكَعُوا لَا يَرْكَعُونَ. When it said to them, bow, they don't bow. So he said at that moment in time, that was a serious thing at that time. That was the maslaha murajjaha. I will describe that. That was the thing the consideration that overcame all the other considerations. Yeah.
It must be a different art in how to weigh up and consider which one takes precedence over what. Like here's a good example.
Yes. So that is the what differentiates the quality of different scholars, the ability to differentiate and think of multiple things at once. And if I'll do that, the diagram, the matrix, maybe after Salah, that shows some of how you can end up putting things into a priority order, the calculus, yeah. But this is just to show that the fatwa, the mufti, when it comes to giving an Islamic ruling on something, you might be so convinced about this, 100%, you might be giving chapter and verse and all of these types of things. this is what this person said, this is what this, and you might be thinking, wow, the reality of democracy is X, Y, Z. Well, he's going to say, Jazakallah khair, I've got other things to worry about. Yeah? Thank you, your point is taken on board, but we don't just rely on one thing when we're making a fatwa. That person, the mufti also, he will look at, what are these? Consequences. This is consequence A. If I give A fatwa, if I give fatwa B, if I give fatwa C. If I say halal, yeah? Firstly, some of them said they look at, the Maliki person told me, and they look at 7 degrees of consequences, subhanAllah. Yeah? If I tell him this, then this will happen, and then this could happen, and then this could happen. If I tell him this, then this could happen, this could happen, this could happen. 7 up to 7 things. Because giving a fatwa is no small joke, right? Even if some people say, no, it's clear, the text is clear, we can't overrule a clear text. This is the method of the mufti, okay? He'll say, what is the consequence of this fatwa, this fatwa, this? What is the consequence of saying, vote for A, vote for B, or don't vote at all, for example? Not only that, they'll look at the percentage likelihood of the appearance of that consequence. Yeah? Look at percentage likelihood. You can't know the future fully for everything. So that's taken into consideration as well. Like the Prophet ﷺ, some companions came to him. They were together. One of them woke up when it was time for Fajr. When they woke up, one of them said he was in janaba. He's in a state of janaba. He needs to have ghusl. So he said, what do? I've got some kind of injury on my head. Should I still take a bath? Some of them said, they spoke without knowledge. They knew the theory. So they said, yeah, of course. It's clear. The Prophet ﷺ said, if you wake up in the state of janaba, you have to. Allah said, Allah in the Quran. They didn't say like this. I'm just showing how people today would say it. Yeah? Allah says in the Quran that you have to wash your faces. You have to make ghusl if you wake up in a state of defilement. So he did that. He acted on their advice and he died. The Prophet ﷺ was very angry with them. Yeah, he said they killed him. May Allah kill them. Yeah. Now this is a phrase. قَتَلَهُمُ اللَّهِ. This doesn't mean literally necessarily. It's like a ta'bir, it's an expression, right? To show that there's a serious thing. Why? They didn't know 100% that he would kill him, but they were still censured for giving him a fatwa, basically, for speaking when you don't know the whole methodologies of the Prophet ﷺ's teaching. Not every person alive at the time was a scholar, was a mufti. But if they had asked, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu, he would have said, go and ask the Prophet ﷺ. Or if he didn't have, it was something urgent, he would have given them more suitable advice, right? The point is, they were censured for speaking without that knowledge. So they will look at the percentage likelihood of the outcome of consequence A, consequence B, consequence C, for example. This is what the mufti will do. Okay. Not only that, when it comes to weighing these, okay, they will look at the time. There's a little watch on his wrist. The place. Okay, this is a country. So the time, the place, the person, all of these things change the fatwa. Yeah, all of these things are capable of changing the ruling given to that person. So a fatwa given in Egypt, okay, saying that voting for whatever is haram, it's understandable. Because A, there's only one person standing the election, Hosni Mubarak or whoever, Anwar Sadat. And B, that person is being tortured and in prison and his friends are being killed by a regime that's purportedly calling itself democratic. So you can understand when people are giving anti-democracy, anti-voting fatwa. But those same people that in this context, when they're talking about Islamic theory, they'll say, yes, this is a kufr system, this is evil, what the UK is doing, for example, they might say. They'll say this is a very evil system and X, Y, Z. But when it comes to the fatwa, some of them will say, no, you have to vote. Of course you have to vote. So people who don't understand the Islamic process of giving a fatwa, they'll think, wait a minute, you just said it's haram the other day and now you're telling us to vote. Because the fatwa is different to the theory of looking at one issue in isolation. Yeah. Now even these, one of the ways you asked, how can we juggle between these things? How do you know? Okay. And after Salah, we'll do the calculus, the matrix, yeah, which I like to call how to win an argument against your wife. Remember that one? But the idea is we have a appreciation here. There's another set of instructions for how to implement Islam in your daily life. Yeah, that's a different thing. We're not talking about that. Okay. So what were we saying? Right. What happens? Assalamu alaikum, by the way. Thanks for coming back. We're just doing a little bonus while the brothers are coming in. About an autopsy question that came into the Sharia Council. Interesting discussion. We'll have that later maybe. Now, what happens when you're faced with multiple considerations, multiple texts, multiple things applying at once? Okay. And this is another thing the Mufti will look at. Okay, let's say two things are contradicting. Okay, let's say at the same time as these, the miskin has uncle Parvez wedding. Yeah? Consideration he's on this weekend. But he's also got work meeting. Yeah? And he hears those dreaded words from his wife. Is your meeting more important than your family? Yeah, we're all kind of accustomed to this this terminology.
Blackmail.
Yeah.
Is Uncle Parvez your uncle or your wife's uncle?
Who is he?
Decision easier.
Yeah.
Is he a rich uncle or a poor uncle?
I took a picture of this, but I'm gonna rub it out so I can expand. Yeah. If you think we need to discuss something urgently from this, let me know. But we're against time here. Yeah. So right now you've got a conflict between what each of these things we call masalih, plural of maslaha. Okay, it just means a consideration, something you need to do, something that's of importance, something of benefit, or a harm that you want to avoid. That we generally call them juggling masalih, right? We've got two conflicting ones now. Family versus meeting. Firstly, is that how the Mufti, if we think critically, is that how a fair person would represent that conflict? See, now we have the husband speaks out. Right? The husband would say, no, it's a wedding versus staying alive. I've got the light bills to pay. I've got to get groceries. I've got to pay for stuff. This is my work. This is our livelihood. Okay.
It's all about how you frame it, isn't it?
Yes, how you frame it. What's the proper way to frame it? Right. The proper way to frame it is this and this is a maslaha. These are just examples of that principle. So these square things are here. Okay? These circular things are this big. An example of something that falls under the family category. Yeah? So the name of the maslaha, the name of the category is, you can say family. Those are important things in your life. Family, work, health. Obviously Islam at the top. And even within Islam it has many different values that Allah wants you to hold fast to. So the first thing is separating from an instance of family to the family itself. Okay? So this is what, when two things contradict, this is one of the things the Mufti will look at. Okay? The different masalih. Okay? Islam. Let's do it here. Islam. Okay? Life. Wealth. Family. Etc. Okay? This is one dimension. Alright? Very important to recognize. This is one dimension. Okay? But there is a second dimension. Number two. What would the Mufti look at? Where in this dimension would the wedding and the meeting fit? If Uncle Parvez hasn't seen you since you're 6 years old, and he won't even recognize you, he won't even realize are you there or are you not there, okay, then this is what I call the daruranas. Zarurat. Yeah? How urgent is this? Is this code red, code orange, or code yellow? Or code green? Okay? If it's here, this is code red, then if you don't do that thing, the whole family will be up in arms and it will be a massive, huge thing. If it's code maybe orange, it'll be a bit bad if you don't turn up to the wedding, but it's not the end of the world. And code green would say something like, if you didn't turn up to the wedding, they wouldn't even realize. You can even phone them and say, yeah, that wedding was excellent. They say, Jazakallah khair, yeah, I saw you, yeah, good, nice suit you were wearing. Yeah. Likewise, the meeting. Is the meeting something your job depends on? Is it something important? Or is it something, it's good if you go, but if you don't go, it's not much of an issue with work. Yeah. This is what Mufti looks at. When the different masalih are competing, he'll look at another dimension, okay, where this might trump this, but this might trump this. So it is too simplistic to say work versus family. Yeah. Even in Islam, subhanallah, salah, for example. What's more important, salah or going shopping? Huh? What's more important?
To the wife, it's shopping.
So you shouldn't. Don't answer a question like that. Yeah. Say you can't. That's a. If somebody asks you a question like that, you should be wise and think. Wait a second. That's a loaded question. Let's hear you out. What's the actual situation here? Because someone will say, Sheikh is ruling by other than Sharia halal. Who say no, it's haram, kufr. Yeah, will reject you from Islam. You say, Jazakallah khair. Then this person will come and say, so and so believes voting is haram. Come on, that's not the issue you asked him. Yeah? Then what is the issue? Salah versus shopping. Imagine you're going shopping somewhere, Black Friday, you're going to a mall far away. Yeah? Above 80 kilometers or whatever your opinion is, now you are traveling. Can you delay and shorten your salah? Huh?
Yes.
Imagine if you need something really important for your, a need. Huh? You need some, new clothes for the kids or whatever, and you can't afford it. But if you go there, it's fine. You'll go far away. But as a result, you'll have to compromise on your salah. But your salah is not, should I pray full stop? That might be a bit on this side. It's, should I pray on time on the full salah? So you go with that over that. It does not mean you're compromising sharia. Remember, implementing a particular ruling in a particular time in a place and not implementing that ruling is not the same as making halal haram and haram halal. Yeah? This is what Mufti will look at. What else will the faqih look at? We said the likelihood of the intended outcome. Okay? Another thing they'll look at. Something if your engagement in something is mubashar or ghair mubashar. Which means this. If you're doing X, if you're putting an X in the voting box, for example, are you participating in something bad directly? Mubashar? You're selling someone a weapon to go in a time of war or something, a time of fitna, turmoil? That's not allowed. You're selling grapes to someone, you know he's going to go and turn it into alcohol. That's not allowed. He's going to ferment wine with it. Okay? That's mubashar. But if you're doing something that's leading to consequence 1, that's leading to consequence 2, and that's leading to, this is a haram exclamation mark, by the way. Something bad is happening. I can't use an X because I already used that. Yeah? That's ghair mubashar.
What does mubashir mean?
Direct.
Direct.
This is indirect. Okay?
It seems like
So, for example, I'm buying and selling with a non-Muslim. Okay? I'm buying bread at Tesco's. It's what one of the brothers I know is a sheikh. He said, a brother who's anti-voting, he spoke to him, he said, the sheikh said to him, do you buy bread at Tesco's? Yeah? But you're supporting a haram system. Tesco's does all types of haram. It uses your money to buy and invest in haram things, right? And it pollutes the earth, and it maybe even employs, slaves for whatever products it gets. Does all kinds of haram. He says, no, but I don't do that directly. I just buy bread. But it's leading to haram, right? He said, but I've got no choice.
If choice Morrison or other
Morrison's, yeah.
He can bake it at home himself.
Bake it at home. You have bad ingredients.
flour from
The point is, there are many brothers and sisters who feel that living here and doing something, engaging with the system is something internally bad. Even if they do, work and contribute to society and vote or whatever. Even if they do engage in part of the system, they might feel there's something naughty, something bad, something dirty that they're going outside of their Islamic bubble to do, which is detrimental to their health and just being active and reaching your potential. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not hold you to account for something that goes way beyond your ability to control. Yeah? And this is what the Mufti will look at. Are you voting for someone to bring about a system which is batil, invalid or incorrect? Or are you voting for someone who's within the system already? You're choosing the person who goes into the position that's already there. Yeah? So they look at mubashir or ghair mubashir. They will also look at, and this is similar to how close is something from the prohibition, the locus, the ayn of the hukum. Imagine if something's haram and your action is all the way right here. Okay? For example, we're talking about contradictions here. You have two competing masalih. Imagine a brother, he's asking for a fatwa, can I employ a woman who doesn't dress appropriately, maybe according to Islamic kind of values, she doesn't, hijab and all that kind of stuff. Can I employ her to work in my shop? Yeah? So the proper mufti will say what? okay, what's your reasoning? Why are you saying this? If he says, because I want to get more customers. Yeah. So this, let's say this is the locus for the prohibition of free mixing and the legislation of hijab and male-female interactions. This reasoning of his will maybe fall around here somewhere. Okay? But if he says, because why do you want to employ her? Because she asked for the job and I have to give equal options and opportunities for all the candidates, and she happens to be the best candidate. So that reasoning is way over here. It's far away from the reason, from the actual locus, the aim of the hukum. Okay, when it comes down in real life. So something here is easier to overturn than something here. Okay? So that's how close it is to the hukum. What else? What else did the Mufti look at? The Mufti will look at, if two things are conflicting, he'll look at, so the masalih, he'll judge, and the urgency. And he'll also look at, is it an individual issue or a versus communal issue? Yeah. If by compromising on certain, or not applying a particular hukum on a particular area, is that going to lead to the benefiting or removing a harm for an individual versus a society? Okay, the social benefit might be a widespread. You might overlook the harm on a minor scale to get to avoid a bigger harm on a greater scale, right? And here's where here's where the local versus foreign masalih come in. Okay, the Mufti will also look at benefit versus harm. Okay, because pushing away a harm takes precedence, avoiding a harm takes precedence over gaining a benefit. So you can't do something haram to gain a benefit, for example, which is understood to be a benefit. Like you can't sell alcohol for a profit. Okay, but you can a haram thing might become allowed to avoid a bigger haram happening. Right? Hence, some individual rulings do not apply in some areas and compared to others. Okay. Like the famous example, Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, when he's encountering Mongols, they're drunk. They're drinking and they're whatever. And some of his students went to enjoin the good and forbid the evil. He said, don't. What's going to happen if they sober up? They're going to start killing Muslims again. Right? So you forsake one thing you overlook one haram to avoid a bigger one. Okay? Obviously, again, I repeat, I'm not doing this for us to do it ourselves. This is to understand what goes on in the mind of a mufti before the haram or halal fatwa pops out. Yeah? What else does he look at? He looks at, and this is part of the individual and the kind of عرائد الأهلية أو أوارد الأهلية, the ability of the person. What can the person actually do? Okay? I.e., these are possible anticipated outcomes, credible outcomes. So the person, for example, he's not able to change the whole system, but he's able to reduce one haram thing, and he's unable to fix 99 haram things. Okay, is he obligated to try his best to reduce that one haram thing? Because of the many principles. Some, for example, al-maysur la yasqut bil ma'sur. Something which is doable cannot be forsaken because of something which is difficult. If there is something, there's a big, massive, difficult task to do, and you can do 5% of it easily, then your obligation to do the 5% is not excused because of the existence of the 95%, which is hard to do. Likewise, the principle ما لا يدرك كله لا يترك جله. If that which cannot be completed or realized 100% should not be just forsaken and left 100%. Yeah, meaning if you have maybe 10 policies in in a local community or government or whatever, there are 10 policies that are against Sharia. 100% Allah dislikes these policies, and you're able to fix one of them. Yeah, are you allowed, or are you allowed to avoid not fix one of them because of the existence of the 9 others? Yeah. This is something that the Mufti will take into consideration. Generally speaking, the principle is no. But it doesn't mean you go and enjoy and swim around in the 9 haram things. Again, that has to go through the whole process of the Mufti. Yeah, there has to be a specific allowance. Okay, and that cannot be done if the way we're teaching Islam is mixed up with the way Islam is practiced, is different to the way Islam is practiced rather. Yeah. When we talk about Islam being a whole system, that's true from that perspective. That doesn't mean that we're excused from trying to fix a broken system one step at a time. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not call us to account for those that inability to do something. Good question. If you implement cutting the hand of the thief, for example, and you don't implement other things, then it will lead to bigger negative consequences. And guess what? That's what the Prophet ﷺ taught. Don't implement this ruling in battle, in times of war, for example. There's no cutting of the hand of the thief in war. Don't implement it if there's a shubha. If the person, for example, says, I didn't steal it, then nothing is implemented on him. Even if you have, experts in the field doing the DNA things, and the judge will say, Jazakallah khair, your services are not required here. Yeah? And this is how you make sense of the fatwas the Prophet ﷺ gave. Because if you end up living Islam in a bubble, think every single thing that you find in the Quran and Sunnah as yourself, it has to be implemented. If you're not implemented, you're sinful. You will end up living in a bubble, and when that pops, you're in danger of going to the opposite extreme, as has happened with many people. Right? If they taught this rigid thing and they don't understand the what goes into the creation of a fatwa, the production of a fatwa, and they think of themselves more nuanced and more intelligent of the reality than the people actually do Sharia, right? So, for example, and there's a chapter in the books of fiqh called Sihhatul Islam ma'a Shart al-Fasid, the correctness of accepting Islam from a tribal group despite an incorrect or a bad condition. So again, in some of the ways when we teach Islam, we ignore, some people, they ignore these examples of the Prophet ﷺ's life. So they'll say, when the Prophet ﷺ, the Quraysh gave him, the option, oh Muhammad, we'll worship your God one time and 1 year, and worship our gods another year. Why didn't the Prophet ﷺ, he accept their position? Why didn't he accept their compromise? No, because there's no compromise in Islam. But they'll ignore these areas of the Prophet ﷺ, making what in their twisted worldview a compromise. Okay, the Prophet ﷺ, if a tribe would say, okay, we'll accept Islam, but we're not going to do any of this jihad stuff, we're not going to pay zakah and all that kind of stuff. The Prophet ﷺ accepted it. Okay? And I'm not saying this is to be applied everywhere. Remember, I'm talking about the fatwa. Why? Because it went through the system. If a condition, if a compromise is going to lead to a bad outcome, then Sharia says don't do it. Sharia says don't do it. If a compromise leads to a positive outcome in the end after going through this process, then the Sharia says do it. Sometimes Sharia says you must do it. Like the Battle of Hudaybiyah, the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. Prophet ﷺ, he made a treaty with the Quraysh, this, a peace treaty, no more war for this many years. And as part of your compromise, any Muslim who comes to Medina, you're not allowed to let him in. You have to send him back. And imagine this. Now imagine, and the Sahaba, they felt that they compromised too much. Some of them were very upset. Even during the contract, the Quraysh said, we don't believe you're the messenger of Allah. Don't say this is a treaty between such and such person and Muhammad the messenger of Allah. Say this is a contract between such and such person and Muhammad the son of Abdullah. And the Sahaba, they said, no, I will not. Ali radiallahu anhu said, I will not rub this out. Okay, he's not talking from a perspective of fiqh. He's talking from a perspective of the love of the Prophet ﷺ. He said, how can I rub the name out of the Prophet ﷺ? The Prophet ﷺ then himself, he said, show me where it says Rasulullah, and said he scrubbed it out himself, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Yeah, he's teaching his Sahaba there's a difference between the theoretical and the actual implementation. And imagine if there was social media back then. Imagine people saying, Astaghfirullah, how can we compromise? How can you have diplomatic relations with Quraysh? How can you say someone escaping the Quraysh? You can't let them in. You're supposed to help your Muslim brother. You're supposed to do this, you're supposed to do that. The Prophet ﷺ agreed to this condition. Why? Because the outcome was in the interests of Islam and Muslims. He doesn't just look at one thing in isolation. Right? And look at the result, the barakah of the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. This, according to many scholars, they said this was the beginning of Fath Makkah. Right? After Allah revealed, Inna fatahnak laka fathan mubina, we have given you a great conquest, lifting the spirits of the Muslims. Why? Look at from this point after a few years, in peacetime, because of what the Muslims were able to broker, the numbers of Muslims exploded. Because in peacetime, dawah can spread like fire. Right? But it's an example of Prophet ﷺ not implementing something because the Sharia system, this whole thing, it tells you at this point in time, it's more beloved to Allah to do X instead of Y. Right? And there's so many examples of this. So many examples. I was just flicking through some things the other day. I just came across like 10, 20 examples. Right? Such as, there's some things that have an Islamic punishment. Okay? And sometimes the Prophet ﷺ, when someone would do something that warrants an Islamic punishment, the Prophet ﷺ would say, don't kill him. لا يتحدث الناس أن محمدا يقتل أصحابه. Don't let, so that the people will not say that Muhammad kills his companions. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Right? For a PR reason. Yeah? What else? So many examples. You can think of some in your own minds as well. Right? From the Prophet ﷺ, like subhanallah, Battle of Uhud, Abu Dujana radiallahu anh, the Sahabi, yeah, Prophet ﷺ, he saw him strutting like with pride and arrogance. What did he say? What did he say? He said, what did Prophet ﷺ say? He said, Allah hates this type of walk except in this scenario. Yeah, this is Islam. It's not just the first part. That just a list, a whole collections of categorical, rulings to apply everywhere and anytime you can get your hands on. No, Allah is looking at the situation. Okay, what is the situation at that time? Likewise, the Prophet ﷺ said to Aisha radiallahu anha, if it wasn't for the fact that your people were new to Islam, I would demolish the Kaaba and rebuild it on the foundations of Ibrahim alayhi salam. But because they're new to Islam, I'm not going to implement this. Why? Because it will lead to a mafsada, it will lead to an evil. People will be thinking, wow, this is the Kaaba we've been circumambulating for so many years. How can this be? It will lead to a fitna for people, a trial. Right? Likewise, the Prophet ﷺ said, subhanAllah, remember the story of the Bedouin that came and urinated in the masjid? Yeah. What did the Prophet ﷺ say? If someone's urinating in the corner, and some of the Sahaba jumped, to go and stop him. The Prophet ﷺ said, let him finish. Yeah. Imagine just taking that out of context. Is it halal to urinate in a masjid? Yeah. No. But if somebody has started doing it, and if you then stop him, what's going to happen? He's going to start spraying everywhere. Look at this is the fiqh of Islam. Prophet ﷺ is teaching us. Let him finish. Okay, he's finished. Now I'll speak to him. You go and clean up the mess. Yeah, get some water, all that kind of stuff. This is what the Prophet ﷺ taught his companions how to implement Islam properly.
So is there a list of these incidences that you could share with us? I mean, you are, but in a different form.
Yeah. The thing is, look, the ulama are very careful about narrating these incidences for a purpose. Because you don't want people to think, I can start implementing and choosing to implement, not implement things willy-nilly. Right? But when there are people who are reducing Islam to fit through a modern lens of just a set of categorical imperatives, that these are rules and you always have to implement them, and don't sleep until you implement all of these rules. This is what implement Sharia means. Now we have to change. We have to learn and teach some things that were not normal to be taught to masses. Yeah. In different times, different places, it's different what is fard ayn and fard kifaya to know. In our parents' generation, they didn't need to know certain things individually, but the community needed to know things. But in an age where there's an explosion of social media and everyone's calling to all types of weird stuff, there are other things that everyone needs to know now. For example, maybe something about atheism as well, about modern shubuhat, and likewise we need to know some of these things as well. So I will share some of these things, inshallah. So the point is, there has to be an appreciation of the process of the mufti. Okay. One of these issues is yes. Okay. If you're voting for someone who's an absolute khabith, he's saying, I'm going to go and kill 500 Muslims. I'm going to wage war on 3 Muslim countries. Yeah? That's candidate A. Okay? Candidate B is saying, so he's saying 4 countries. Candidate B is saying, I want to wage a war on 2 countries. 2 Muslim countries. Yeah? Somebody thinking in the twisted kind of modernist mindset will say, if you vote for B, you're voting to attack 2 Muslim countries. How can you do that? Like the autopsy type example we said. Yeah? But Sharia, according to the Sharia paradigm, the fiqh scholar will say no. If you vote for B, the Sharia, according to Sharia, it means you're voting for the difference between B and A, which is you're voting to save 2 Muslim countries being attacked, for example. So because you're voting for the lesser of 2 evils, this is a problem. Some people, when they hear this, their ears prick up and they go into all kinds of modernist kind of rhetoric. Voting for the lesser of 2 evils doesn't mean voting is the lesser of 2 evils. Voting is not an evil in the first place. It depends on the outcome. If it's an evil, then voting is evil. If the outcome is a good one, then voting is not evil. Okay? That's a very important principle, because lesser of 2 evils as a phrase, as a ta'bir expression, it can be applied to many things. Some things there's strict rules to, some things are not strict rules to, like this one. Do you understand now how it could be possible for someone to say voting is obligatory for you? Yeah? Not because there's a hadith somewhere that says voting is obligatory, but because if somebody's done this process, it's through the Islamic worldview, not through the some kind of Western or modernist worldview, and they find this, they do this assessment, they could say because this in the Sharia goes over the threshold, it could become obligatory for you to vote now, for example. Yeah.
I have a problem with the term, using the term obligatory for this, because obligatory in the 5 categories means if you don't do it, you're sinful.
Yeah.
I mean, obligatory in the English says that you must do it.
If this were the case, for example,
You must do it.
this would be, this many would say, for example, I'm not a mufti, I'm not a pastor fatwa, but theoretically, the theory would suggest, had all other things been in balance and normal, this would be possible to render something obligatory. Yeah? Islamically.
Yes.
Okay? That's the issue here. Now, as for those who say, but you can't do something wrong in order to get something right, that's presuming the whole process said it's wrong in the first place.
With that, the thing I've struggled with more is that what the person chooses to do, whether they kill or kill 4 or 2, and you're saying it's obligatory for you to make sure that they kill 2 and not 4. But what about the third option, saying I'm not going to enable either of that? I'm not going to take the liability.
If you're enabling them, yes. But the enabling in the Sharia means something different to enabling according to Western moral philosophy. Enabling in the Sharia means there's a sea and he's saying, I'm going to do none.
Yeah.
Okay? That's what the Sharia definition of enabling means. I.e., his fi'l, his doing means X, and his tark, his not doing means Y. Yeah? Sharia looks at what will happen if you do something and you don't do something. If you don't do something and nobody will be attacked, then it means voting for this guy means you're enabling him. Okay? You're talking about the percentage here now.
Yes.
And I agree with you. You have to take into account the percentage of the possibility of likely outcome. The likelihood of the outcome. And that's why I said this is a theory. Imagine even if it's just 50-50.
I mean, in reality, it doesn't mean therefore you must vote Labour, because it's more complicated than just this kind of reduction.
Absolutely.
To this. I mean, we're talking about.
But this is just a principle to highlight. According to some people in Western moral philosophy tradition, without this, you're enabling this person. But according to Sharia, it doesn't see as you're enabling that person. Yeah? Sharia looks at your intention for voting. If your intention is a protest against that guy, then you are not, under the Sharia, held responsible for the actions of this guy.
If I abstain.
For example, we were in Sweden on the weekend, and the Imam in the local masjid, he was talking about how in Copenhagen, the Muslims were faced with a far-right candidate in their local area, the MP. So he said all the Muslims voted against that person. Yeah. So, and he had, obvious agenda. He was saying in my local area, we're going to ban hijab or whatever. So in that case, maybe I wouldn't be surprised if they were saying it's obligatory for you to vote against this guy. Yeah. But again, al-i'tibar huwa i'tibaru ma'alat. Yeah, al-umur bima'alatiha. The affairs or the rulings are influenced by their anticipated consequences. Yeah. So what might be wajib in some place might be mubah in another place, might be haram in a third place. Yeah. Or in the same place in a different election. Yeah. Or a different constituency.
Whether in Sharia,
Allahu A'lam.